Welcome back, everybody, to the Here for the Truth podcast. My name's Joel Rafidi. I got my co-host Yerasimos with me as always. To regular listeners, thank you again for being here. To new listeners, we appreciate you being here as well. Today we have Max Lowen in the house with us. She is a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. She was raised amongst a family deeply connected to this global cult. And she has experienced just about the most horrific things that any human being can possibly experience. And I just want to frame here that what you're about to listen to in terms of Max's story is shocking. That's the only word that really comes to mind. And so I would like you to obviously brace yourselves, settle yourselves, and understand that what you're about to hear is going to challenge you, push you, pressure you, and it's going to bring up some darkness. And for me, I think it's really important that we begin to broach this conversation and that we develop the capacity to psychologically understand and integrate the level of evil and darkness that can exist and does exist on our planet. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to listen. Thank you for being an individual who is inclined towards the truth, who wants to leave no rock unturned. And if anything, we hope this episode is inspiring to you, as it definitely was for us, in being able to hear firsthand an individual overcome just about the most horrific things that there is to overcome, and to come out the other side shining so brightly and so powerful.
You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos.
Max is a global citizen, having grown up in various countries. She's trilingual in Italian, Spanish, and English. She is a survivor of satanic ritual abuse, torture, and trafficking, who went on to do her healing work and train in trauma and recovery to help other survivors and those trapped in the cycle of violence. Max created a show called Unbroken, where she interviews survivors, truth warriors, healers, and teachers. She integrates the knowledge she has about the global deep state political machine with issues such as child trafficking and trauma-based mind control to help educate people about the global control structure that keeps humanity trapped in cycles of individual and collective trauma and control. Knowing the truth facilitates finding solutions to the myriad of issues facing humanity, and Max shares her knowledge about healing and recovery in an effort to assist individuals in looking inward and doing their shadow work. The restoration of humanity and our beautiful planet begins with each individual healing themselves and stepping into their fullest potential and power. Inner awareness of self and outer awareness of the social engineering and harvesting of humanity and all life on the planet are necessary components to achieving freedom within and without. Max authors articles analyzing the truth behind a variety of geopolitical programs and is currently working on a book about her life, as well as creating a trauma training protocol that can facilitate healing for all trauma survivors, including those ritually abused. She's an advocate for children, whom she considers our most precious asset and the future of the human race. That was so beautifully written, Max. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
No, the honor is all ours, truly. One way we always like to kick these off, particularly with the first-time guests on this podcast, is we want to dive a little bit deep into your personal hero's journey, which obviously it sounds like is a very deep one. So I guess my question is, what are some of the most catalyzing, profound, transformative moments that have led you down the path that you're down now?
So I think the profound moments are just the long journey back from the first 18 years of my life in a variety of ways. Bit by bit, I put myself back together. And I think the thing that moves me the most is to expose the truth, because this global cult, as I call them, operates on secrecy and deception. So we need to know what's going on And truth is light. So that's one aspect of it. And that's one reason I speak out. And the other thing that I think is super important is that everything is inside us. We're actually way more powerful and full of potential than we know. We've been dumbed down and, our consciousness has been restricted. So it's going in there and putting ourselves back together, because the global cult uses trauma collectively and individually to fragment us, which then it's called trauma-based mind control. Then they can program us. And you see it today. You've seen it after what happened the last few years. So go in there and heal yourself, put yourself back together, remember who you are, put all your pieces back, step into your true power. At that point, I think what comes is a remembrance of what's our mission? Why did I come here? We all came here to do something together. Then we join with each other because they've divided and conquered us in every way they can. And the only enemy we have is them. And then we can change this reality because there's more of us and we actually have the true power of that life force or that thing you might call God or the one consciousness or whatever. That flows through us. It doesn't flow through them. And I can explain that further. But so it's really, they've succeeded by dividing us, traumatizing us, mind controlling us, poisoning us in every way, using all their institutions to create the system of control. So many resources, so much time, so much money invested in our devolution and control. That tells me they're scared of us. We actually hold the key. We can change this reality, but it has to start in here with us. And it has to start with people like you guys and myself who are putting out the truth, So that's kind of what drives me and what my passion is. And I can tell you kind of the story of what happened to me because they're doing this to kids still today. So that's the other thing. We need to know. And people have told me oh my God, this is heavy. I don't want to hear this. And I get that totally. And I have compassion for that. But it's kind of the same thing as if you're walking down the street and you see a guy raping a child and you go, oh, I can't look at that. That's too horrific. And you keep walking. Mm-hmm. You've got to know what's going on and particularly what they're doing to children because we're responsible for that. We have to do something about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the opening statement. I mean, you're definitely speaking our language in terms of the things that, we advocate for in terms of, healing lies within and the change. Change is going to happen first at the individual level. We need to heal ourselves and do the work necessary to be as whole as we can be. And yes, like you said, love to get into your story a bit because, so often people, especially over the last several years, people hear these terms like, ritual abuse, satanic ritual abuse, and all these things that are happening and, maybe what the quote unquote elites are doing. And I don't know if people really understand that to the degree. And you're someone who has gone through this personally, and many other people that have gone through it, and you work with people that have gone through it. So, I think we have a mature audience. So, anything that you want to share to shed light on this, because we need to know, we need to be able to face the darkness in order to change it. So I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm curious, what were those first 18 years like? And also why and how did you find yourself in such situations?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, sometimes those of us that are put through this, it comes from a family lineage. Sometimes it's opportunity. You've seen all these child sex abuse scandals in preschools and all this other stuff. So in my case, it was familial. My Italian side, my uncle worked with people like the Vatican, the mafia, the government there in Italy. And he was responsible for this medical sort of military torture facility under the ground in Rome. There's a few of them. And actually, these, by the way, exist in every country. They have tons of underground bases everywhere where they both traffic children and do all kinds of experiments and torture. So it began basically after birth. One of the first things that happened, and these guys have a playbook because they understand psychology. And so And if you talk to a bunch of SRA survivors, you'll find that we've been through the same kinds of tortures and things. So I just want to put that out there. So one of the first things he did is break attachment with my mother. So he did a ritual, and I remember being in a crib, and he had tied her to a chair and had these like strobe lights coming on and off, and he was putting masks on her, and then having these really loud sounds, and then holding me by the foot and twirling me, which is called spinning, which is a way to sort of begin the fragmentation. And, you know, my mother, I believe, was also put through this stuff. So she was already not well, but this kind of thing made it so that, you know, she was either violent in my childhood and attacking me and almost killing me, or very, very depressed and not getting out of bed. She actually had alters, so I could tell when she was switching. So just my mother alone was a very difficult situation.
Max, sorry, real quickly, how many generations do you think this goes back, like within your family lineage?
I think many, because I've done some ancestral kind of work, and it's, you know, what came out is that all the evil of many, many generations, to me, it appeared like a boulder that I was carrying on my back, on top of my own experience. So, and this is usually the case. They go back generations. Yeah. So, you know, so things, for example, so he would take me, I grew up in many different countries, and because of my dad's job, and my uncle would come and visit at the countries, but also every summer and winter holiday from school, my mom would take us to Rome. And I believe she was programmed to do this. And then when I was 14, my parents divorced, so we moved there full time. So when I was in Rome, my uncle would take me down into the facility and do all kinds of things. So when I say torture, I mean electric shock, being buried with dead bodies, waterboarding, being put in these giant freezer lockers, being put in cages, having to watch him torture and kill animals and people in the most barbaric, slow, painful ways. You know, the raping, beating, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And then there were experiments like giving me these impossible choices. So, for example, and the facilities rooms, the walls, like 3 of the walls were glass. So there were scientists, there were people watching all the time. You know, they would do things to study people. So like I was taken into this one room where I could see into 2 rooms. You know, there was a little bit of wall, and then I could see into 2 rooms. And he had brought my younger sister into one room, and she was tied to a chair. And then this stranger, this woman, in the other room, and they both had these little bombs tied in their mouth and tied around their head. There was a panel in front of me, and the choice was, he said, you have to blow up either your sister or this lady. And, you know, I would say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to blow up either. And then he would say, well, if you don't do it, then I'm going to kill them both. So this is like an impossible choice. So, you know, in that moment, and I would have been like, I don't know, 8 years old or something, 9 years old. And so I couldn't blow up my sister. So I figured I'd save one life out of the 2. So he made me push this button. And this woman, you know, I still see it in my mind's eye, you know, her head just blew up. And then it was just her body without a head, and stuff went everywhere. And he took me out of the room into the room she was in, made me put my arm around her headless torso, and then snapped a picture and was like, you know, this is the barbaric, cruel, like inhuman stuff, and laughing, you know, thinking this is really fun. So I would be put through, that's just one example of many, many, many kind of experiments of that nature. And some of them would involve my mother, where I would have a choice to electrocute her or be electrocuted myself. And I would choose myself whenever I could, you know. So they figured out pretty quickly if the way to really get to me would be to harm others in front of me. And still today, with the stuff that I saw him do to animals, like if I see, I don't know, a squirrel run over on the road, or like, a homeless pet or something, I can't, like, it still really affects me. Like I have a pretty severe reaction. I've worked throughout a lot of other stuff, but yeah, that kind of stuff, really stays with you. And in terms of the satanic rituals, these were the first form of mind control. So eventually technology joined in, science and psychology joined in, and then technology. So now they have this nice trifecta. But in ancient times, that was the main form of it. And they do these satanic rituals. And again, I know other people who have been through pretty much the same rituals. And so, one of them would be when I was 14, it was out in the woods and they had a bonfire, and I was drugged with something where I couldn't move any muscle, even like couldn't talk, but I was conscious and could feel everything. And then, had a long line of men raping me. And every rape, they brought these cages of animals, and every rape, they'd throw one into the fire. And so that sometimes still haunts me too, like animals scream. So like that sound, in my ear. A lot of rituals involve forcing kids to eat. They will literally kill and cook human babies and force kids to eat the flesh. There's the parties, the hunting parties, where I would be taken to these mansions with grounds, and other kids would be there too. And they would either put certain costumes on us or strip us naked, and you had to run and hide. And then these elites that were gathered there, and they're drinking and hollering and having fun. And then they go and hunt the kids. And then when they find the child, then you get raped and tortured or whatever they want to do. And actually, one time, just to illustrate how these people are, I witnessed this one guy. He had this long kind of old-fashioned sword, and he took two babies and just impaled them alive on the sword, and he was swirling it around, and they were laughing and whooping. And at the end of those parties, they usually would sacrifice a child. It would be the centerpiece on the table with the food all around it. So if you ever saw the movie a long time ago, Eyes Wide Shut, I had to walk out of the theater when I went to see it, because it reminded me of some of the parties would be indoors. It would be black tie, and the kids would be dressed up, and they're brought in so these people can choose the age, the gender, the race of the child, like they have their preferences. So that movie illustrated like one of those balls, and often wearing masks. They just didn't show the children in the movie. But so I'll stop here and let you ask a few questions, because I know that's a lot right there.
I'm just fucking floored at what I've just heard. Like,
yeah, I've read things about this, and but just that you went through that you had that experience. There's just so many questions I have. Like, why? Like, why are they impaling babies on a sword? Like, what is the purpose? Like, I understand all the mind control and all that, but like, to that level of evil, like, what is the purpose? Or from their point of view, like the spiritual purpose. I don't want to call it spiritual, but you know what I mean? Like, there has to be some underlying reason for it.
Yeah, there is. So I'll describe to you. So I was also taken, so the Vatican, it has these levels way, way, way below that you can only access through tunnels. And they have these rooms there. One actually has a giant throne to Lucifer, and one has this giant altar. So I was taken there, and you'd have like the Black Pope, the White Pope, the bishops, actors and actresses, high corporates, politicians, all these kinds of elite people in attendance. And they would stand around the altar and they would bring in a baby or a small child alive and brutalize the child. And then they had a special knife and they would cut the child open. And they had these chalices at the corners of the altar, so the blood would go in there, and they would drink it. And sometimes they would pluck out the heart and eat it. These people are cannibals, and it would be candles and chanting. And the purpose, as you say, is spiritual to them. It's to bring in Lucifer. It's homage to Lucifer, and it's to bring in demonic entities, which many of these people invite to enter them and take over their human soul. So this is what they consider, because Lucifer can give them power, fame, and wealth. So they will sell their human soul and that connection to the true creator, but they worship Lucifer as the true God, right? And so if you think about it, little children are the closest thing to God that you can get. So it's also, pardon my French, but a fuck you to God. It's a way to mock, to destroy. And in terms of the children that survive this, it is so these elites, like anyone in big positions of power, in these families, they'll do these kinds of rituals to their own children, okay? They will do this to their own children to fragment them, to program them for their future global roles. So they will do what the cult wants them to do. And you've seen in movies how they create like super soldiers and assassins, and there's honeypots. Well, this is what they do. They break the psyche down, and then when you have too much trauma, you fragment and an altar pops up. And then they program that altar for a specific task. And then, so like an assassin will go do something when a trigger word or a command is given in that altar, but then the main personality won't remember that. So that's just to say that's another reason they do these things, because even watching this kind of stuff is hugely, obviously, traumatic. Just hearing about it is traumatic, right?
Yeah.
So were you meant for one of these global roles? Is that why it was happening to you?
I believe so. I was trained to, I have an audiographic memory. I was definitely trained. So they train you to sexually service adults. It's an altar. So, these people don't want a screaming, crying child to rape. They want one that's actually acting out a role. So I was definitely groomed as one of those honeypots. My family was political. I speak many languages. I grew up in many countries. So I'm still putting some of that together, but I think there was a role that I would have had politically, or perhaps, spying or being, behind politicians. I'm not sure. But when I went to college, I breezed through because of my memory, So that's my suspicion. And like I said, I'm still kind of putting that piece together, but that's as far as I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. What is it like? How can you kind of escape the system a little bit, whereas maybe other family members or people that you knew growing up have not? And also the fact that you're able to speak about it and inform people about it. I'm always curious about that, like why that is.
Yeah. Well, many people have escaped, and I know a lot of them. Like my friend Jeanette Archer, who speaks out about the royal family having abused her. She was trained to be something called a mother of darkness. And so she was trained in like how to psychically attack and kill and stuff like that. And when she was 21 in a ritual, she just decided, fuck no, I'm not doing this anymore. And she went after them. So what they built her up to be, she used against them, right? And so in a similar fashion, I did something like that when I was about 17. there was a ritual I was being put through. They like to do a lot of Jesus rituals. So they were having me carry this huge wooden cross, and I saw my sister hanging by her ankle from a tree, and I'd had enough. It was 17, 18 years of this insanity, and I just blew. And my uncle was there. There was some clergy there, and they can train you. I know this sounds fantastic, okay? But they can train you to manipulate elements. So I had some training with air. And so when I got angry, the air started to swirl. It was dusty. It was outside. And it was like a little bit of a tornado. So they lifted up off the ground a little bit. And this part of me came through and said, that's it. I am fucking done. You will not touch me ever again. And this voice just said, because you know what I can do. But I think the main point of that story is that I said no. Okay. And that goes for everyone on this earth. When you don't say no, they consider it implied consent. They tell us what they're doing. It's written in documents like Agenda 21. It's in movies. It's in other texts. If we don't say no to their agenda, then they consider that consent. And so I just said no. And I think that is it sounds kind of simple, but there's a huge power in just saying no more. So I got to this point and I just said, that's it, I'm done. And I left Italy and I came here to the States, and that was it. And my friend Jeanette had the same thing, where they let her go at that point because she blew. And this is the case with many other survivors, who have survived and who have left.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense too in terms of like the power of the individual, whereas you can try to utilize these techniques and tactics on an entire group of people, but not every soul, every spirit is the same. So the idea that there's going to be the same result with everyone is, it's not going to happen. And so it makes sense that it'd be people like yourself and others who, get to a point, and like you said, say no.
And I would add to that, ever since I was a small child, I came in connected. So I was able to communicate with it. The avatar for me was Jesus, the figure of Jesus. So I would, when I would be like in isolation for days, I would be communicating. I would be in another dimension. So I had this connection, which they tried to break, constantly. And that also helped me to survive. It's that connection with what you call your higher self or the creator or, the all. And I even actually, when I was young, remembered that I wasn't from here, that I had volunteered to come to this planet for the major transition time, which is now. And when I was 5 and I was living in Africa, I was lying outside at night looking at the stars. And I had a vision of all these stars falling down to the earth. And this voice said to me, there's a bunch of you that came, and hang in there, stay alive, because you'll find them later. And so whether this is right or wrong, I believe that many of us came from elsewhere to this planet to be here now because we've been in a war, spiritual war between good and evil for a long time. And this planet is important to the multiverse. So it's not just altruistic. I think, it's like we're elite warriors, that came here because what happens here affects everything else, which in general is the case. Everything's interwoven and interrelated. So that knowing also helped me get through. There was a part of me that, does that make sense? That was connected elsewhere. And so I wasn't just in that life.
And so like you haven't heard from your uncle or any of these other people since leaving?
No, I mean, I know of them. And, here's an interesting thing. My theory is that he took in one of those entities, and that's why he was able to be so cruel. And I heard about 5 or so years ago that when he was like in his early 90s, that he had been in a car accident. And according to my mother, who sent this information, he was suddenly not home. So after the car accident, he was completely blank. He didn't know who anyone was. He didn't remember anything about his life, and he was regressed like a small child. And my theory is that at that moment of the accident, that entity left him, and he was just sort of an empty shell. He's still alive. I think he's in his mid or late 90s, but obviously I have nothing to do with them. I changed my first name, my last name. I don't want anything to do with those people and, their insanity.
Yeah. And so like, I guess this particular cult, like, does it have a name? Like, is it what most people commonly refer to as Illuminati? Like,
yeah, I call it the global cult, and then it has many sub factions. Like the Vatican is an essential component of the cult. The Jesuits, they call it the Holy See, SEE, but it's really the Holy See, SEA. And it does tie to maritime law and the birth certificates and all that. And so they were the ones who take custody of our souls. And the Vatican is satanic. So they worship Lucifer. I've seen that myself. If you look at the architecture, if you look at their auditorium and that room where the Pope sits with all these demonic looking statues behind him, you can see it. And so their plan has always been to usher in Satanism as the world religion. And I know you can see the evidence of that today. If you saw, I think it was the Grammys, I don't follow that shit, so I don't know what it's called, but that Sam guy and the devil's horn and the women dancing, they do it in the halftime shows at the Super Bowls. There's now Satan clubs in schools. Their agenda was to make Satanism the world religion and bring Lucifer in as the god, and also to normalize pedophilia. And you see that happening as well, right? In schools here in the US, they're teaching this totally sexualized curriculum. And UNESCO actually, if you look at their guidance, go to the UN website and UNESCO, and they're saying by age 6, children need to be taught masturbation, oral and anal sex. By age 9, they should have access to online pornography. By age 12, they should have had their first sexual experience. And then you see stuff like pedophiles calling themselves minor attracted persons. And, there's been this deliberate, slow grooming to where we are today. And this whole trans agenda is really a transhuman agenda, a pedophile agenda. I mean, it's many. So all these things that have been going on in the last few years, I see it. I'm like, oh, dang, there it is. They're bringing in Satanism and they're normalizing pedophilia. And that's their wet dream, is to live openly as who they are.
how do they wield so much power?
Well, so if you imagine the hierarchy, like a pyramid, the top part, they're not human. And that's where the Anunnaki comes in, which means those that came from the sky or those that came from the heavens. And if you look at all ancient texts, even the ones on tablets, and you go even to cave art, and even all Mayan, Aztec, and then European art, you see depictions of beings coming in spaceships. You see astronaut-looking suits. And even in the religious art, you see God or whatever on a cloud in the sky. You see these like rays that look like sunlight. I mean, that's spacecraft, right? So it's out there if you want to see it. And if you look at all ancient art, you will also see images on churches everywhere of demonic entities. So the top were these alien, dark astral demonic entities. And then they have a pyramid. So they go down layers and layers and layers. And actually the bottom layer would be presidents and politicians. So they give orders to each layer below, but it's totally compartmentalized. And what they've done is they've infiltrated everything or created it. So the media, social media, the miseducation system, the medical system was created by one of the bloodline families, by the Rockefellers. And he says in his secret covenant, it is created to slowly poison and kill us while profiting off that, right? They've taken control little by little of the food supply chains, of water, of, Hollywood exists to socially engineer us. So they have control at the top levels of religious organizations too, right? So that's how they've gotten their agenda. And then down even to the local level, they will have some of their people like at the heads of the hospitals, the education system of every area. They control the courts, that whole system is actually, that's another rabbit hole to go down, but we're not even beholden to that system. It's for the dead, and we're living. So they have carefully over time infiltrated. So they have absolute, so if something happens, I actually had a client who she had put her children with some babysitting, not knowing, and they were targeted. They were satanically ritually abused. And when she found out, she went to the police, but see, they have someone in the police, that's theirs. So instead, she began to be attacked, and CPS was called on her, and her business was infiltrated, and there were attempts to poison her. So, and this is a very common story.
Yeah.
Right? CPS is a child trafficking arm of our government. And I'm sure you guys know this, the IRS is not a government agency. None of these are. They're private corporations disguised as government agencies. So people think that they are under this authority, but it's all them. So does that sort of answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, I know Joel asked the question, but I've watched, multiple documentaries or read articles, and even the whole Jimmy Savile scandal that went down in the UK. And, you have well-meaning police officers that investigate this, and they get to a certain point, and then it's like, yeah, no, you're not going to continue down this line of investigation. Actually, we're transferring you to a completely different department. And, I think within these different institutions, this collectivistic mindset where people, go along to get along to rise up the ranks so they can continue to, make money and be successful. And the people who do challenge the status quo, they just get tossed aside. That's why after, generations and generations, we have these systems where people, quote unquote, normal people are like, how could this even happen? I don't even understand why this is the way. But when you have decades upon decades upon decades upon decades of this kind of behavior, and people are propped up, and then also people are compromised because they're put in situations and they're videotaped, and they're blackmailed. Again, it's a pretty intricate and complex web.
Yeah, they've really covered their bases. They're pretty clever. And, to what you just said, when people are presidents or people in high global positions on their 40th birthday, so if they're not part of the cult directly, then they're inducted. So on their 40th birthday, they have to rape a child and murder a child and do horrible things. And then that's videotaped. And so, so pedophilia undergirds the entire structure. That's kind of what drives the whole thing. And then trafficking children is, besides war, is the highest grossing industry out there. And I was trafficked out of the Vatican myself and saw so many children trafficked. And so, unfortunately, they have really done a great job, but to succeed, like you just alluded, they need people. And see, people can be corrupted by money and offers of, privilege and position, and also controlled by fear and blackmail. But so it's the bad news that it's people that are perpetuating their system. They couldn't do it without people helping. But on the other hand, it's the good news, because that means if we stop complying and consenting, they're pretty much screwed. So, the police work for them, the courts work for them. All of it is rigged. But again, it's people that are doing these things. So that's the bad news and also the good news. And that's why we have to, yes, they're the bad guys, but humans are participating in the system. So I don't want to like make it seem like humanity is a big victim, because a lot of
Right.
humans are perpetuating this, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's the people make themselves slaves from a psychological standpoint too. And so would there be any masters, quote unquote, if people
Yeah,
know and we're like, I'm not a victim and I do not consent to this.
right. If you've ever seen the drama triangle, it's victim, perpetrator, savior, right? And it's a trap. It's a total trap. So you're absolutely right. If you're a victim, you have to have a perpetrator to be a victim, right? And if you're trying to, and that's why it's not good to try and save people, because then you're making them a victim too, right? So they have all, and they know psychology and they know our nervous system inside out. And so if you ever looked at David Hawkins' map of consciousness, I love it because it shows you the lower scale, it's low frequency emotions, survival emotions, fear being one of them. So what they do is they keep humans in fear. You see it, right? There's fear porn. There's always a boogeyman. Is it Arabs, over there supposedly blowing up the Twin Towers? Is it some boogeyman virus? Is it whatever? They pump it and pump it and pump it because they know that if they keep your brain in survival, actually that part of the brain has a value in a situation of actual real danger. Like if you were in front of a big tiger, thinking would be too costly. You need to just react, fight or flight, right? So, but when that happens, the prefrontal cortex shuts down because it has to go offline. So they know this. So they keep you in that survival brain and in that frequency bandwidth deliberately, so that, and you've seen people have lost the ability to critically think, right? But also they subsist on that frequency because they're lower dark beings. So another trick is when we rise above that and heal ourselves and we're not in that frequency, then they can't feed off of us. And they do feed off of us etherically too. It's called loosh, right? So we're like a big bunch of farm animals to them. So again, we do have the power. It's just, and they've devolved the consciousness and they've mind controlled and they've done a great job, but it's not, I don't want to mean to come across like they're omnipotent and have all this power, because it's fake power. It's like the Wizard of Oz when you draw the curtain, right? To a degree.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit at like how you extracted yourself and what was your journey? Like what happened next? Like you said no, and then what?
You left the States. Yeah, what happened from there?
Yeah. Yeah, because my father is American, there was always a thing about me coming to university here, so I did. And, when I look back, a lot of things were part of my healing. And so I studied psychology, no surprise. And I got an undergrad and a couple of grad degrees, and I worked. So I did stuff like I worked in the jails. I did trauma groups for women in the prisons. I worked in rape crisis centers. I actually did men's group. I ran a batterers program for a county on the East Coast. Worked with homeless trauma survivors, things like that, with abused kids. So that was a part of my journey, because when I was in that facility watching people be hurt, I was totally helpless. So now it was like I found my agency and helping people. And there was no kind of population I couldn't work with because, I'd seen it all, right? So helping people with trauma helped my own trauma, and it gave me a sense of empowerment. Eventually, I ended up in therapy. And so actually, I got pregnant and I married and I had a daughter. And after having her, kind of the vault opened with some of the more horrific memories, and they started to just like come out in nightmares. So I would wake up at night screaming, and like I would have sweated out the whole bed. After my years of therapy, I actually had to throw out the mattress. It was so bad. And I would have body memories where like the memory would come through and I would like pee on myself. It was a like memory of being electrocuted. I would have visual, like things just come up and out. And so that was a pretty long but important process of you kind of have to feel it and know it to heal it. And so the way that it works is because of all the trauma that I had, I fragmented internally. And so and then you have the trauma and then you have to put it in a drawer and put it away. So you have to bury it in you. So it's like all these drawers opened up and all these child parts of mine that were holding all this stuff got to unburden it. And then I kind of integrated myself. Having my daughter was huge because it like opened my heart. It was love. It was that beautiful relationship. And, you know, when she turned 18, I woke up that morning crying out of relief because I was like, oh my God, she reached adulthood and she's never been raped. She's never been harmed. She had everything that I didn't have. So being able to do that was super helpful. And it's still a work in progress. So I monitor my thinking because, like I explained with the brain doesn't know the difference between a negative thought and an outer event or something on a screen, right? That's why when you watch a movie, you get startled or you cry if it's sad. So I monitor my thinking and my emotions, and I'm always reframing them. And so doing that over the years, I pulled out all the subconscious programming and I replaced it with my own reframe, like good programming. So we can do that, you know. I basically watch myself all the time. I exercise. So I started kickboxing when I was in therapy first because I had all the rage come up. And then I realized it was healthy for my body because, again, my body was helpless. I couldn't fight back when I was a child. And trauma gets embedded in the body. So my body being able to then fight was like really helpful for taking that out. I started to eat healthy. I started to sleep. It's like basic stuff, meditate. So just getting away from all the propaganda and the BS that is always pumped at us, reading, kind of learning more about different things. So all of that, I would say, was part of my journey to healing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the kickboxing and things like that because, you know, you're in a state when you're young or you have these impulses you're not able to express. And then, you know, you're able to express them in a healthy way, in a safe way that allows some of that energy that's trapped in the body, that's stressed, to kind of move out in a way that I think supports healing of a person's nervous system.
Yeah.
Help build capacity in that regards.
And, you know, it's also like interesting. I discovered that being triggered is a way to find the wounds of your past. Because, you know, we all get triggered, but I would get triggered by stuff. And if you don't, the thing is, like, if somebody's in front of you and they say something or there's something happens and it triggers you, we tend to like react back on the person in front of us, you know, and attack back. But so I learned to like not do that. And then if you don't, there's 10% of the trigger is the situation in front of you. 90% it's from the past. So you can follow the thread back to, oh, why did this trigger me? What is that all about, right? And then you can find all the things in you that it's like if you had a bruise here, you'd be fine until somebody walks by and touches the bruise and then you're like, ow, right? So heal all those internal bruises and then go figure, what if you could get to a point where nothing triggers you? That's total inner freedom. So I always teach people, like, when you're triggered, like, identify, go, oh shit, you know, my heart is racing, I'm sweating, I'm ready to like say nasty words, stop, you know? If you're in front of someone, say, I need a minute, go away. And the emotions are there, so you've got to let them out. So many times I got like a plastic kid's bat and I kept it in my room, and I'd go in my room when I get pissed, because I had a lot of rage. I'd take the bat and I whack the shit out of my bed and scream my bloody head off, or I'd go drive in my car and scream. And I mean, yeah, sometimes people would look over and go, who is that mad woman? But whatever, I got it out. So then your nervous system resets. Then you can think, because remember, now you're triggered, you're not thinking. Then you can go, wait a minute, so what happened? And then usually you find some reason why you got triggered. You can heal that. And then you can reframe the whole thing, right? So like as an example, I have had the worst road rage. And what really pissed me off is when I'm trying to pass in the left lane and people go slow in the left lane. And then, it's like this rage comes up and I say things in my head like, you stupid fool, you ass, how dare you, and I want to kill them, And then, so one day I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what is that? And then I realized, oh, that's memories of being like held down as a child, of being thwarted, of being, locked in a cage so it's like, you're preventing me from movement, from doing what I want to do. You're in my way, you're blocking me. And so once I realized that, it got a lot better. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still get a little peeved, but I don't go to a full-blown rage about it anymore. So
I totally get it. We did an episode a while ago. I think it was with Kelly Brogan, and I was talking about my road rage from the past. And it is interesting though, because I think the key is, and this is because awareness is one thing. You could be aware that you get triggered, but can you create more space between the stimulus and that response to be able to even do the things that you're saying, which is, okay, communicate to someone, I need a minute, or I'm stepping away from this circumstance right here. That's where it starts. Just to be able to stop and not say the things, send the texts, make the phone calls, throw the FUs out there, raging, and this is the dance.
Yeah, I mean that's the process of reclaiming one's power, really, because I mean the things and the people, the events that trigger us, like they're the things that hold power over us ultimately.
Yeah.
It's sorry.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say I agree. It's like, and I used to do this when I worked with the men, because initially they would say, well, because they would be arrested for a domestic violence assault, and they would either get a choice of jail or 6 months of men's group. So right in the beginning, they would be like, well, so I would say, you got to go around the room and share either the incident that got you arrested or some other incident, because we're going to break the ice here. It's like addictions. Denial is a big symptom it's going to get. And they would say, well, she made me do it. And I would say, wow, that's kind of bad news for you, because if she or anybody else out there has that much power over you, oops, like that's not a good thing. But if we're responsible, now we have the power. So I think that's really well said.
Yeah. Max, when did you first start connecting with other people that had gone through what you had gone through? And when did you decide to connect with them, speak out more about what's happening in the world, and from your experience and from the experiences that you learned from connecting with others?
It was just maybe a couple of years ago. It wasn't that long ago. I was feeling really angry at God about what's still happening to children. And I was like, people need to know the truth. And then I heard, it's not like I hear with my ears, but it's that inner hearing. It was like, well, then tell them. And I was like, what? Like me? And so I thought, all right, I have to do something, and that's another step in my healing journey as well, right? Like I got to a point where I'd done enough of my work that I could do the next step. So I thought, all right. So I told my story on video, and that was like the first thing. And then I decided to interview other survivors. And so it just sort of happened that people started to come into my sphere. It's all intent. Like when you start doing what you're supposed to do, then the universe brings you all the pieces, right? Yeah. And then I was like, well, I'm going to interview people that I call truth warriors. Like I interviewed Mark Passio and David Whitehead and people like that, and bring pieces of this cult to light, what's going on. And then I think you want to also always give people solutions when you give them the ugly truth. So I would talk about trauma and what it is and how to heal, and interview people that would have aspects of that as well. So that's kind of how it started. But if you had seen my first attempts at being on camera, I was so terrified. Like, it was awful. I have evolved to the point that now it's actually fun to do interviews. So it's gone pretty quick. But if you had asked me 5 years ago or 10 years ago and said I was going to be doing, interviews on air live, I would have laughed in your face. Like, I had no idea I was going to ever go in that direction. But we need to reach more and more people, right?
Yeah.
And one of the incredible things for me about this experience is meeting people like you guys and everyone that I've met. I mean, what an incredible, there's so many awake, spiritually aware, evolved souls on this planet doing their part to change this reality. That was so amazing to me because I grew up, when I was little, I didn't know if there were good people in the world. I was surrounded by psychopaths. And so I'm so thrilled mainly to have this global community that I know of these amazing people. I mean, I don't know, when we were in an Acapulco, right? Mm-hmm. We were in the same hotel, and everyone there was one of these people. And I was like on a high there because of the frequency, the consciousness. When do you get to be around human beings like ourselves, right? So that's one of the things, one of the gifts for me in what I do.
Yeah. How old are you now, Max?
I will be 60 in July.
Awesome. It's amazing. I think they just get to have this, whole brand new phase of life experience, since making that decision. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think it's important to follow that guidance, that inner voice. You can call it intuition. As a society, we're trained to be only in the mind, but you have to connect to the heart and follow that. And so I'm always going to follow that voice and do whatever it is I need to do next, because that's the only thing that matters to me. When people talk about, when other women talk about like the latest handbag or going to the spot, like I can't deal with that kind of level of reality. What I care about is what's going on this planet, because guys, this is the most amazing time in the history of Earth. And we're here and we have a front row seat to what's happening. And my opinion of what's happening is this global cult is going down. Like, their narrative is fragmenting, their structures are fragmenting. I think governments are going to go down and people are going to be scared. But in truth, what does government do? It steals our money with taxation and it regulates and restricts us in every way. Like, if it weren't there, it would actually make our lives easier, Yeah. So I think we're at a point in history where we're witnessing the shift from this controlled dark paradigm into something completely new. And we are going to have to be creative and like create new structures in place of the ones that are going down. But this is really kind of an amazing time to be alive. I don't know if you guys agree, but.
Oh, I definitely agree. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
It's pretty wild.
It's particularly interesting now with, AI in the mix and how that's coming into the fray and, their intent with that as well. Like, there's some kind of handover from an old system to a new system. I'm not sure. I had a thought, like, this whole conversation about child trafficking and human trafficking, like, it really peaked, in like early 2020s and really within the Trump era. And I feel like just from a impartial observation, like, his presidency was a big driver, for right or wrong, of this conversation and of this topic coming into the fray in a bigger way, awareness around it, etc. What are your thoughts on that? And we've had David Whitehead on this podcast previously, and him bringing up the same points, around this conversation wouldn't exist in the way that it does now without Trump.
I would say that anyone who has been a president is part of the cult. So I don't share that part of it. But so they are prepared for everything. So for example, people that woke up to the mainstream media, these people have also infiltrated the alt media. So there's a lot of truth there. Okay. They're speaking our language because it's catering to people that already figured that out. But then they have the little turns that kind of trap you. So like, trust the plan, somebody else is going to do it. Somebody else is going to save you. Then you're parked in a corner and you're not doing something, right? So when people went out of religion, they created the New Age, right? That's to trap people that saw through that thing. And then the New Age has a lot of truth, spiritual truth, but it's also like, well, just don't focus on evil, just focus on good. Well, evil is going to do what it does, whether you focus on it or not, right? So it's pretty convenient to like ignore that, turn away from that, and just focus on unicorns and butterflies. So I think, so for example, that movie that came out about trafficking, The Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
People's awareness has reached a point that they're aware of trafficking. So then they will put something out. And I'm not saying there isn't good in the movie. It opened a lot of people's eyes. But what they didn't say in that movie, they made it seem like trafficking is cartels. And it is, but they're leaving out that the top of the structure is involved in this, right? So they give you more truth when you, and people have said to me, but why would they expose these things? Because then more people will know. And what I say is no, it's for the people that are already awake, because the average person, if they saw any information like that, they would just reject it. You saw that during the latest 3 years where you could tell people, don't take that thing, this is fake, and they won't listen. So if someone's not awake, they'll consider information like that to be conspiracy theory, and they won't absorb it anyway. But those that are will go, oh, this is right, this is true. But they always have a cap, right?
So it's like throwing a dog a bone in a sense. Like, here you go.
So it's like, as we rise in consciousness and figure out more stuff, then there's seemingly people that are saying that stuff. But don't be deceived. These people are very, very clever. So yes, a lot of stuff came out during that presidency, but I do not think that this person, there's none of those people are going to be our saviors. No ex-president, no ETs are going to come down and save us. No 2,000-year-old man's coming back. It's us. It's here. We're the ones to save ourselves. So I think there's tones of savior program and, in that kind of stuff. And I get it. There's many good points about that presidency, but I don't share that belief that this person is a good person ultimately.
Got you.
Yeah.
Are there, I guess, any other high-profile names within the alternative truther community that you believe are deceptive or of poor ilk that many people might be, magnetized to?
I don't really want to go there, but I would just say this. There's truth in a lot of things that, important or powerful or alt media people are saying. And so don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because you can receive the good points of it, but just be skeptical. Just keep an eye out, because they're everywhere. And so there's, I don't want to name names, but there's a personality that reveals a lot about the cult that's out there that I've talked to Yerasimos privately about, that is a known, Satanist and pedophile, but presents themselves, as a voice of revealing a lot of truth. And the truth that this individual is revealing is true. So that's great. But it's the wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, that's not the right metaphor, but they have to, by universal law, tell us what they're doing. And when people wake up to a certain point, then they will cater to that level of people, but they still have their people controlling the whole thing. And I don't want to seem, dark and negative about it, but that's just the reality that I know about. So certain figures, and just to give a more known example, because this is already known, Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think, oh, she's done so much for children. Yeah. You know how many children she's raped? She's a giant pedophile. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said by people that she has actually abused. So, and she's she's part of the club, but she will. So the people that we're taught to worship in society and see as heroes are really the worst people. And then the people that speak out, as you know, they either get ridiculed, discredited, murdered, blackmailed, turned in some way. So it's just be careful. Take in the information, but don't glorify anyone because, and beware of the messages to stand down, to let someone else save you, to be told use your own discernment, So I would say there's a lot of good things out there, but just be careful, because if you're out there in any position of, influence, then be skeptical.
Yeah. I think that's very, very sage advice. And I think what we need most discernment around is where we're leaking power, where we're giving it away, where we're placing too much onus on someone else. And also where we're not becoming the final arbiter of truth within ourselves. I think ultimately we have to stand as that anchor at all times.
Yep. And we have to, do what we can do. So, they're trying to, they burned Texas recently, killed a bunch more cattle there. They've taken out a lot of livestock. They've taken out a lot of the global food supply chain. I mean, in a sense, corporate food is poison. So, that needs to go anyway. But do something about that. We can all grow food on our balconies, in our backyards. We can go to farmer's market. You can get a CSA box. So you can start to get out of the system a little bit, like in that way. If you have kids in school and they're being taught all this crazy stuff, take them out. A lot of teachers don't want to teach that. Get a group of parents, pay a teacher, do some homeschooling, do some co-op schooling. Try to live. And I really want to say this. It's hugely significant to live with morality. You've got to live the moral life. It's easier to do the bidding of evil. It's easier to look away. It's harder to stand for the truth and to say no and to, live a moral life. But that's what's going to get us out of this pickle. And there's a lot of interesting voices and people, remember Marjorie at Anarchapulco? She has a whole food network and it's about water. And there's a lot of amazing people out there with amazing ideas. So I would say focus our attention on building up that. It's really no point in fighting them because they've really controlled everything. Just say no to their agenda, to their structures, and go forward and create better ways, for yourself and for others.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go, and something Joel and I have spoken about on this podcast, and even with the work we do in our coaching program, and even the people in the so-called truth freedom community that I align with the most are the ones that are talking about empowerment and providing solutions, and are more optimistic. They aren't living in this doom and gloom land. And that doesn't mean we stick our heads in the ground and pretend like la la la, nothing's happening. But someone who has the capacity within themselves to understand what is happening, but not put so much energy there and go, listen, I have power. I'm going to create something. I bought some land, or, I've taken my children out of the public school system. I'm building these communities. I mean, we're seeing it. We're seeing it in a lot of these events that we go to, and the people that I'm meeting, they're just cool, you do your thing in the quote unquote matrix, live your life. I'm going to do what I can to build the life that I want to have for me, my family, my loved ones, my community. And I think that's,
I like those people. I like those people because I agree with them. Don't let them take your guns. And, if everybody got together and stopped paying taxes, by the way, again, this, but the IRS is not a government agency. It's actually it's a private company. It's primarily owned by the Rothschild family. And so you're donating your income to a very wealthy, the wealthiest family on earth. Well, yeah. I mean, it's nice. They're wealthy because they're taking the fruits of your labor, and they give a small percentage to governments, but they keep the rest. And this is historical. Think of the times of kings. where the people were supposed to bring them the best of their crops or sacrifice, meat or whatever. It's historically been that these people that sit up here, they're parasites. They live off of us in every way, right? So yeah. I think some of these patriots and Christians have the right attitude. I mean, they're saying a lot of good things, but we're all a little bit manipulated in some way. I mean, we grow up in a culture, think of the word culture, it has the word cult in it. From birth, you're indoctrinated. I mean, it's tough. It's amazing that so many people are where they are today. Like, I'm proud of all those Americans that are like standing up to things and speaking out. That's what's going to change it. When there's a certain number that do not comply and consent, the cult can't run anymore. That's the secret they don't want you to know. We have the power, So I agree. I love those people.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible testament. Sorry, bro. I was going to say, it's just an incredible testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to experience the deep level of conditioning that all of us in many ways have been through. And on some degree, it is trauma-based mind control. Like even just the fact of being publicly indoctrinated by a government school for 15,000 hours between, kindergarten by the time one graduates, and to still be able to rise through, see through the conditioning, break down the layers and, really live a life of meaning and purpose. I mean, I believe that we are the most powerful beings,
Yeah.
We still love with all the crap thrown at us. People still help their neighbors. When they burned a lot of Oregon a few years ago, the county and the state didn't do anything. The people came together and helped other people, right? And so that's who we really are. And imagine without that interference. Like, I've read studies that says that every child is a genius, but then they're dumbed down by the system. And, I spoke about that ritual of them breaking attachment, which they do with all SRA survivors. But think about babies born in hospitals. They're taken and put in the line of bassinets in that room behind the glass. And then look at all mammal babies. They're on top of the mother's body, right? Like, what the hell? So they're breaking attachment collectively as well. And then economically, both parents have to work. A lot of women have to go back to work 6 weeks after giving birth when they know that the first 3 years of a child's life are the most significant. And in psychological studies, they figured out for a baby, attachment is more important than food, right? So society is set up. They want your child in state hands as early as possible. But despite all of that, here are the three of us, and there's many of us, right? And like, we've popped out of the matrix, to call it that, right? And here we are, like, liberating ourselves every day. So we definitely have resiliency. Trauma is very healable. If we come together, we're unstoppable. And I think it's already rolling downhill. Like, it's too late. They can't put us back in the box. COVID failed. It was, by the way, satanic ritual, collective, just like 9/11, just like wars. Those are satanic rituals. It didn't work, guys. It didn't fulfill what they wanted it to fulfill.
Yeah. Can you imagine them trying? I mean, they might, but can you imagine them trying to pull some virus thing again? And it's just not going to happen. I mean, you might get your 10, 15, 20, whatever percent people. They're going to go along and they'll be rocking their 90 and 95 masks. But there's so many people that are like, yeah, I'm done with that. Even people who maybe, did for whatever reasons chose to go along, or, I mean, people are on the path they're on. I'm not into this like blaming and like, oh, you idiot, you didn't. Like, at this point, if you're aware of certain things, if you're, not going to fall for something again, cool. Let's go. Let's all join together. Let's all become the strongest, most badass individuals we can be, and come together in community that way, and do the important work of living morality and passion, and doing the things that we want to do, and creating what we want to create, and supporting one another and championing one another. Like, I'm just kind of done. Sure, I like to talk shit. I have my fun here and there. We're complex human beings, but generally speaking, like, I want to see the best in people, and I don't know. I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, man, we hear you. Hey, Max, are you seeing the story broken now about Emmanuel Macron, the French president's wife, being a man? And like, there's no images of this person that exists prior to 30. Apparently, it's
Mm.
like the brother, and like this is like Candace Owens is out there saying, "I would bet my entire professional reputation on the fact that this individual, is a man."
I don't know about her specifically, but this is
Yeah.
a thing like the Satanic cult does. So I mean, this has been going on for decades before the trans movement. Many of these people, many of these wives are men. You know, we had a president with a wife who was a man, who's a transgender, you know, a few presidents back. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. It's pretty obvious. Yes, this is a very, very, very common thing. And so they transgender these people that they're going to put in these positions of power. I think, you know, Bill Gates, look at his wife. Doesn't look like a female to me. You know, I can't prove it, but I do know this is a thing that they do. They're one of their, you know, they're one of their demonic gods is transgender, you know, has the goat horns and the breast, but is a male. You know, they do this and they have done this. A lot of people in Hollywood, a lot of actresses have been transgendered when they were younger. So they appear to be female, but they're male. And it's part of the cult agenda. So it's one aspect of it is depopulation, right? They want to get men used to being attracted to manliness. Like if you look at a lot of the female figures that are supposedly the most beautiful, they're not very female. They don't have the curves and the roundedness, you know. So there's that. And if you get kids to surgically alter themselves and castrate themselves and take these puberty blockers like so many are being indoctrinated to do, they will be sterile, you know? And then it's a breakdown, that trans movement. And no offense to anyone who feels gender dysphoria and wants to live as the opposite gender, fine. But this is a program aimed at converting kids and doing all this stuff. And it's also a grooming towards pedophilia. Once you accept all these crazy things, then the next thing is, oh, well, poor pedophiles, they deserve a right to exist, right? There's multiple, and then it's a transhuman agenda because now you've taken away gender. And then, you know, the next to alter the body, then implant a chip in your brain, like Elon Musk says. And then, you know, it's just a march towards taking away everything that's human. But yeah, to go back to your point, absolutely. It's super common that just start looking at celebrities, start looking at wives or even just any of the people out there and start identifying because, you know, males have the more chiseled jaw and their hips are more narrow. Like there's a lot of subtleties, but yeah, that's one of their favorite things to do.
Do you think this transitioning happens though, like really early? You know,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, oh, let's wait till they're in high school or after high school. Like it's early.
Yeah, because these people are part of that club. So they've been doing this for decades and decades.
Yeah. What a story. I mean, like just like what the things that go on in this world, and so many people, again, they choose to stick their head in the sand, or they're not aware, they're not exposed to this. They don't realize that life exists in books and other information outside of what gets fed to them on the TV.
Yeah, and you can find it. You can find this information if you start to dig, you know. It does. It sounds like a psychotic, crazy story, doesn't it? It's like some people watching this would be like, oh my God, these people are nuts. But Satanism is about complete inversion. And I hate to say it, but, you know, this is the truth. It's, you know, and once you know it, though, a lot of people have said to me like, oh, now a lot of the world makes a lot more sense why things are the way they are. So in a way, when you get this information, you look out there and you go, oh, now that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then again, it's like people go, oh, okay, and let me just go back to my life. It's like there's a difference between a person who then goes, okay, well, then what am I going to do with this information? How am I going to change my life? Because so many people go, okay, whatever. There's such an apathy that has been conditioned into people as well. But anyway, generally speaking, our audience, they're open to a lot of things. Who knows? Maybe some random person from high school is like, oh, let's see what his podcast is all about. And then they just jump on this as like the first episode they watch. And oh, damn.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Well, waking up is traumatic, because it's a shock.
Yeah.
It's a shock to the system.
Oh yeah, we've dealt with it. People that have gone through our coaching program who kind of became more aware of things in 2020, or even post COVID, they kind of snapped out of things, and and they explain it that way, like, whoa, like for many of them, they hit I got to go down all the rabbit holes, and they're like, I'm so depressed right now, I need to snap out of it. And then I think that's when people realize, okay, I need to put my energy towards things that fuel me. Like, who am I really? What are my gifts? What are my values? How can I bring that into the world and live purposefully?
Yeah.
I mean, that's our responsibility as healthy, conscious individuals. Doesn't mean we can't learn and explore this stuff and put our energy towards, certain realms of study. But at the end of the day, like, do you know yourself? Do you love yourself? Do you accept yourself? What do you want to create and bring into this world?
Yeah, it's a fine line. You need to know the ugly truth, but you also need to balance that out with being in a high frequency state. I mean, love, that's the thing they want to take out. That's why they want to take out the human family.
Oh, yeah.
They want to make babies in bags, and, it's love. And that's one of our most potent things. So yeah, you've got to go outside and hug a tree, or, play with your dog, or, hang out with your child, or whatever. You have to balance out that learning with living. And, that's like my revenge, is to have healed myself and to have a good life and to speak out, but to maintain a positive state. I'm not going to let those fucks destroy me. They didn't. So that's my FU to them,
It's the best revenge there is. No tree can grow to heaven that doesn't have roots in hell, in the words of Jung.
Yeah. And this was the case with me individually, and I would say this is the case collectively. Okay, so we had this dance with the dark. Let's let it elevate us to a higher level of wisdom. We can retain our human nature, that childlike openness and heart and vulnerability, but now we've learned a thing or two. So we can become wise, we can have discernment. And it's like we can jujitsu that and you become more superhuman when you've conquered and you've risen above after that kind of experience, like I did and like so many others. But like all of us as a human collective, we can say, okay, this happened, but let's use it to rise to a higher level of ourselves. So then that's what the dark does. They take a risk. They throw all this stuff at you, and if they can kill you or take you down, they won. But if you take that and you like I say, jujitsu it and rise to a higher level of yourself, healing and restore your mind and learn more, then now they've actually made you stronger and better than you even were before. So that's the message that I like to leave. It's like, let's take this thing that we've gone through and let's rise even higher. Because we can create a world that I don't think we can even imagine right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they accrue a big loss as a result of someone flipping the switch in that regards. Yeah. To like any other people who are listening to this and who may have gone through a similar experience to you, but have not yet perhaps had the opportunity or built the fortitude to really confront it, or to, I guess, speak out about it, because I'm sure there's many. What's your message to that person?
Before you try and speak out, you've got to do your own work. You've got to process all the stuff that happened to you, release it, heal yourself, put yourself back together. Then you'll get to a point where you will, I think that opens up, why did I come here? What's my part that I can do? So then when you get to that point, ask yourself that question, and you'll have that guidance as to what is it that you should do. And I think part of healing, when you get to a certain point, is telling your story. That's part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But first, make sure you're at the right place, because it can be really destabilizing. Like, this is not you know, when people have gone through what like I've gone through, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm here today, but wow, it was hard. It was really, really painful, really hard to get to where I am today. So I don't want to minimize that. But the result is inner freedom, being able to experience the good in life. So you got to get yourself together before you take that next step and put yourself out to the world.
Oh, Max, with some of the stuff you shared in the beginning, like you'd think there's no coming back from that.
Yeah. You'd think, right? And some people don't come back from it. You know, it does kill some people, and it does, you know, some people end up, you know, in a psych ward medicated for the rest of their lives, or, you know, on drugs or whatever. I mean, all addictions are pain management, in my opinion. But it does show you who we really are, because we have that life force energy and they don't. They're literally parasites. It's like we're the sun and they're the moon. It has its own light, but it's a reflection of our light. So it just speaks to how resilient human beings are. But look through history. There's always been wars, and look at the medieval torture stuff. They're in museums now. Like, so the torture I describe is, a lot of that is they've been using forever. They've gone at us for hundreds of thousands of years. But look, we're still here. We're still here, and they plan to eliminate 90% of us by now. And we're still here. So that's who we are. So I think we have to embrace that. They make us so scared. And that's what I don't like about some of the alt media, like, oh my God, this is going to happen. And then, oh my God, no, it doesn't have to happen. It's up to us, because we are co-creators in this, and they need our creative abilities. They created a hell on earth through us by manipulating us. So we take back our consciousness. Let's create a heaven on earth. So yeah, we're resilient as hell. And, some people don't make it, but those that do, we can help the rest. Let's pull each other up, and go forward.
Well said, Max. Thank you so much for coming on and, being here with us and sharing your story. Can you let our audience know how to support you and how they can work with you?
Yeah. So my website is unbroken.global. And I have, I don't know how many, over 100 interviews now. And those are free to watch. And I'm also on Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. I was thrown off YouTube, so I'm not there. I recently, I have a membership option now. So for a little bit of a month, you can support me that way. And then I do a monthly Zoom with members. So we get together, and it's growing. So we're building this community again, because it's lonely to be awake. You don't find a lot of people around you. So if you want to support me, you can become a member. And, as I go forward, I'm going to put out a class, and I do see clients. So I do see people who have been through the same thing that I've been through, and that's on my website too. If you want to do counseling with me, or, coaching or whatnot. So yeah. And then to come, I do want to have a class for survivors to help them learn about all the tools and things that they can do to help themselves. Because anyone who's a healer, you're helping people heal themselves. You're not healing them. That's a very victim-y model, So yeah. So anyway, you can find me there, but you won't find me on YouTube. I was thrown out for misinformation, and I had my videos on Vimeo, and they canceled me too. So, I consider it an honor, actually.
Yeah.
But thank you for having me.
We'll build it off YouTube as well. Definitely a badge of honor. Max, the most incredible story I've ever heard. Like, I think you're such an incredible individual, like, to have such experiences and to come out the other side, like, truly superhuman. And, thank you for being you. And we honor that. It's in the fullness of what it is. So thank you once again. Everyone else, thank you for listening. Stay tuned for the wrap up. Take care. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know where to begin with that conversation. Like that story in the beginning, man, like sure, we've contemplated the possibilities and the depths and the details of what possibly goes on, but to have an individual in front of you who has lived that and who has experienced that and who is explicitly explaining their experience, like no matter what, man, that's confronting, that's shocking. Like throughout the podcast, like I felt myself like just contemplating it, like going into like a little bit of freeze and a little bit of I had to bring myself back to association within myself. Yeah, dude, like wow.
Yeah, it's an incredible story and the bravery of starting to speak out about it 3 years ago, and and she shares that at the end, like you have to heal yourself, you have to do what's necessary, so then when you come to this place where you can speak about it, it's coming from a more grounded, neutral place to a certain degree. But I can't imagine, but then again, some of the most incredible human beings have been through
Hell.
some of the darkest of times.
Yeah.
Mm, and
She's so sweet, like, and just sitting with her for those 90 minutes, man, like, I can really feel her, dude. Like, so much love and respect for Max and what she's been through, and now to speak about it, and now to call in the others, and to give others, semblance of hope, power, and courage, to confront their own, I guess, demons as
well,
well.
well, and also too, I want to highlight that for people watching this, or even over the years reading about this stuff, that potentially are super skeptical. Like when you start having multiple people relay and share the same experiences and the same types of experiences, like it's just for me, that's the evidence that like, this stuff definitely goes on. I'm not saying that like, oh, I don't believe it, but I just mean like for people that go like, what are you going to say to all these people that share these experiences, that share what they've been through, that share similar horrific stories, and then just to blow it off and be like, oh yeah, these are crazy people making shit up. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, I think a lot of people don't want to, again, this is where shadow work comes into play. Like they don't want to even think that evil exists in the world, that this type of stuff happens. They haven't, explored the things within themselves, and they're just like, let me stick my head in the sand, let me turn a blind eye. This is not happening. This is conspiracy theory. Yet how many people and how many articles and how many different examples do you need to go like, there is some dark shit that's happening on this planet in the upper echelons of society, in quarters of power, amongst some of the wealthiest, most ancient families on this planet. And it would make sense, and we see it, that falsehoods get paraded around as truth, and people are highlighted in the media as like these amazing benefactors and philanthropists to society that are anything but that. And like she said, people that are speaking out, people that are representing truth, that are sharing difficult things that most people don't want to look at, they're they're hung, they're what's the phrase I'm thinking of? They're ridiculed and just presented as the worst of the worst. And this is the inversion that we often talk about, that many of our guests talk about. Like as an individual, you have to be super discerning and go, why is this stuff being shown to me on these platforms, the mainstream media that are owned by a handful of people or corporations? Like there's more to the story.
Yeah.
You have to use your mind and your intuition and go, listen, something's off here. So, when you see people being paraded around and the newscasts are just saying, this is the most incredible person, an amazing person, be skeptical.
Mm-hmm. Well said, man. I think this episode's going to be a lot to digest, and yeah, for those that are here, for those that are listening, kudos to you. Kudos for your courage, your bravery, your willingness to lean in, to learn new things, to contemplate new things, and to sweat, to psychologically sweat in the tension of opposites that we speak about, that we often speak about. And, for every semblance and for every degree and intensity of darkness, the same exists on the other side in terms of light, in terms of power, in terms of beauty and potential. And I think it's important to remember that.
Well said, bro.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean. Fast forward and